Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 7. This is financial management, and this week we'll be talking about planning, budgeting, and controlling. So this works really hand in hand with cash flows, which we just talked about last week. I do understand that for both sections of this course, we will be covering both topics. So I won't go through the review material as you won't have had an opportunity to review with me yet. So I will jump right into planning, budgeting, and controlling. And then, of course, I will open up the Excel document and we will go through the activity together. So, as I talked about before, this is the review. We will go through this and understand how all of these different activities affect cash flow. You will probably have noticed that throughout it, some of these activities can be quite confusing, where some things that would typically feel like you are making money will actually have an impact, a negative impact on cash flow, such as an increase in accounts receivable. Technically, it kind of sounds like people owe you more money. And I know we're not really reviewing this, but the idea of this is that if somebody owes you more money, that has decreased your potential cash flow because instead of paying you the money, they decided to give it to you later. And that is essentially what we talk about with cash flow and ensuring that these things happen in the right order for us to maintain some sort of financial success throughout the entire year, peak seasons and low seasons. Which really comes into the whole planning, budgeting, and controlling portion of this lesson. So a couple things that we want to talk about. So planning is the management process that creates the company's goals and how to work towards them. Now, we've talked about this before, and in some other classes, goals are usually lofty. They're 5-year, 10-year goals. It's essentially saying like where we want to be in the future. And some of those objectives will be how do we get there? Now, budgeting is going to be one of those tools in which we determine how we want to get there. So, if I just come up with a goal off the top of my head, we are a resort and we want to maintain an 80% occupancy rate on average over the entire year, full well knowing that we have slow seasons where maybe we're only at 50 or 60% occupancy. So how do we get there? So then we go into budgeting. So this is the process of allocating resources, evaluating the financial outcomes, and establishing ways to measure success. That last part is especially important because you need to understand if you have reached whatever your goal is, which is why it's often hard to measure goals and much easier to measure an objective because those have like a quantitative amount. Occupancy rates of 80% average, I can measure that. To have a successful company, I don't know how to measure that. What is success? And that's different to each individual person. So as an example, so for some of the budgeting, I might say I need to establish salaries for my front desk area. I need to figure out how much I want to pay all these people. I want to see how many hours I need on that front desk to make sure there's no gaps in service. But I also need to understand that, times are also changing currently right now. And that whole front desk area, I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but that whole front desk area and check-in processes will 100% change and evaluate as we go through post-pandemic life. But when it comes to budgeting, we will take a look at rooms revenue. We will measure some of the average occupancies and ADR, average daily rate versus industry and historical averages. And this is where, again, and I've said this so many times, this is where you make your money. This is why you will get $80,000, $100,000 a year to manage a full hotel or a resort or a restaurant, because budgeting is not easy. It's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of hypothesis, so educated guesses on where you think you're going to be. And the better you get at this, the better you will be in this industry. And then the next part is the controlling function. So we set the budget, but ensuring that we stick to the budget's a whole nother can of worms and can be quite difficult. So this is the function that closes the management loop. So we compare results with expectations, our goals and objectives, and we make any adjustments if necessary. So if our revenue goal was achieved, but the average occupancy was down. So we hit the amount of revenue that we wanted, but we didn't get enough butts in beds or butts in seats. So that might be that we need to increase our marketing somehow. We need to look for different types of customers. It seems like our revenue goal, if you were to reduce your revenue, you would probably get more people to come and use your actual rooms. And then you might still make your revenue goal and your occupancy. So you take a look at that and you say, okay, what kind of tweaks and changes can I make to ensure that I'm hitting my budgets and my goals, and that I can do within house. Another example might be increasing marketing budget to help raise average occupancy. Perhaps slightly lower room prices on lower occupancy dates. So if you sell 10 rooms for $100, or if you sell 12 rooms for $85, it's about the same amount of money at the end of the day. And if you are searching for that average occupancy increase, that might be a way to do it. Which brings us to a bit of the planning process. So how do we go through planning, and how do we think about all of these different things that we want to achieve? How do we make up these decisions? And before we do that, we have to know as much as we can about not only our individual property, but also out there in the world, our competition, the market, the trends, and all of those things. Some of the ways that we'll do this is completing a SWOT analysis. So we look at the strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. We look at the goals. So what kind of goals will we have? Often these goals are given to you by upper management, or they could be ownership or a board of governors or directors. At a certain level, if you are your own owner, then you will have to come up with these yourself. So, do you want to make $100,000 a year? That might be a goal for you. And then we go into that planning phase where we say, okay, what are our plans? How are you going to hit these goals? What the costs are going to be? What are some of the financial benefits from this? And then how do we implement them? So it's good to have a goal, and it's good for upper management to agree on that goal. But unless every single staff underneath you are aware of that goal, it's going to be difficult to hit. I've always had this issue that sometimes there's this big lapse of communication between what upper management would like to see from the property and what gets communicated down to the frontline staff. And I know personally, if my boss wants to see, an average of 4.5 star reviews, or they want to see $20,000 in sales on a Friday night at our restaurant, or a weekend occupancy rate of over 90%, then I have my own goal that I want to be a part of that to help achieve it. So how do you implement this across the board? And while this class is financial management, there's a very human aspect and a very human portion of this that should go into your planning process. And then, of course, at the very end is our controlling phase. So where do we reach our goals? Are our financial results good? If we came up short or we missed them, what could we do next, and how do we change some of our plans? Okay. Now, we did speak about this a little bit previously with some of the average daily or industry averages. So when it comes to some of the performance indicators, we look at these as measurement tools. They are performance standards. They are benchmarks. These are like, this is where we want to be. So there are some common performance indicators and standards in accommodation. These are average occupancy, average daily rates, revenue per available room, market penetration index. So I don't know if you've seen this one. I think this is one of the most important ones because it'll tell you not only how you are doing within your particular walls of your business, but also how you're doing in your area. Hopefully in your rooms, division, courses, and your front office, you've already spoken about these. You have an understanding. We will use them a little bit because it's very tied to what we do in our industry. But it's also important to know that regardless, retail, accommodation, front desk, recreation activities, rentals, parking, all of these have performance standards and common averages. So it doesn't matter where you find yourself. It doesn't even matter if you find yourself in hospitality anymore. These will still be there, these averages. So it's important for you to understand what they are. So this is the market penetration index. I love this kind of stuff. You don't have to love it, but it's good to understand it. So what I'm looking at here is in our rooms division, we are comparing a hotel's occupancy to a competitive set of other hotels. So it serves as a guide to understand your rooms division dominance, and I love that word, dominance over others. Over 1 shows your occupancy is higher than the market. Under 1 shows your occupancy is lower than the market. So before I even think about my room prices or changing anything, I might want to take a look at this. Because what this is saying is that generally, my occupancy rate over every month is a little bit under everyone else's. So I don't know why. But this is a bit of a concern. So on the month of April, 1.10. So that means I was roughly 10% higher in occupancy. And then in July, I was spot on with everyone else. We're about par. Every other month, I was below. Now, this could be a bunch of things. We are charging too much, right? So therefore, like we said before, maybe we're still making our revenue numbers, but we're not making our occupancy numbers. And often people would say, well, isn't that a good thing? Like we're not filling up as many of our rooms, but we're also still hitting all of this revenue, which can be good. But we've spoken about this in other classes, that multiplier effect. So when you get those butts in beds, you also get all the other kinds of revenue that are coming in. So you get people going to your restaurants and your gift shops and your coffee shops and using your banquet facilities. You get more of a buzz on the market, and because the best buzz and the best marketing tool that you have is a happy customer, more so than any social media marketing or commercials or rewards programs. A happy customer is number 1. So the more happy customers we can get at a lower price per room, but more people in the building, the better you will probably do. And again, that's that human component that we often, it's hard to measure. And I may have talked with you in other classes about this, where if someone has a good experience, they usually tell, 2 to 4 different people. If someone has a bad experience, they tell anywhere from 9 to 17 people. So it's a very, very important thing that we ensure that they have a positive experience. And typically, occupancy rates that are higher reflect a good experience. That means more people are using this property because something is great about it. So if I am this if I am this hotel, I always think restaurant, I would be a bit concerned to say I need to retool and look at some of my things. It could be pricing. Then the next thing is that we check our pricing against other people's. So if it isn't that, then what is it? Do they have a great marketing plan? Do they have, are they running different kinds of events and specials? Are they doing something outrageous that we don't know about? So, but it's a good place to start. Now, a great thing about all of this information, everything is shared. Like these are public companies typically. You can go online and see what their prices are. You can go online, Stats Canada, and see what average daily rates are. None of this stuff is hidden from anyone. It might take a little bit of searching, but you can find it quite easily. Okay. And then we want to talk about budgets a little bit. So there's many different styles of budgets. You will be involved in some of them, and you might not be involved in others. A personal budget is the number 1 that we all do, and that's ensuring that we can pay our rent and we can pay our bills within the time in which our money comes in as well. So it's difficult for us to pay a bill unless we have received some of our cash flow. Otherwise, we are borrowing and lending. We often as a society borrow too much. The majority of people, they may look like they have many assets, but really it's all borrowed money. A mortgage, a car loan, student debt, even your education is borrowed. Like the bank has that education right now, not you. So this is one of those things to start thinking of. Many different styles of budgets. Operating budgets are one of them. Strategic budgets, complementary budgets, comprehensive, and capital. So let's take a look at a few of these. So in our operating budgets, first we start with the sales. So this is prepared by a sales organization or general management. And this is essentially a revenue forecast on where do we think we're going to get, our money from. So what kind of business are we going to be able to bring in? Historically, we look at that a lot, and we also look at some of the trends that are happening. This would be a very difficult year to plan this because of just everything that's the pandemic and everything that's happening. If I'm a resort property, I would assume that we would have a very busy summer with local Ontario customers. So I'm assuming I'm a Muskoka resort. Probably one of my best years. All domestic, very few international customers, and probably longer stays. That's my guess. Variable budgets are used in production and manufacturing often, where we use standard costs, but we also use it as well. So, food cost versus actual food cost, and it could be labor costs and things like that. And then overhead budgets. So these are often handled by administration, and these usually cover cost items that are fixed or are expected to increase over time. So this could be staff, this could be laundry, this could be marketing, rent, leasing, stuff like that. Strategic budgets are a little bit different. So there's a couple different ways that we look at these. So a zero-based budget. I have a zero-based budget personally, which means all my expenses and revenues start at zero, and the money is used based on an input or output. So you're basically looking not at what you spent last year, but what you want to spend. So a lot of people use this instead of the historical. So instead of saying, hey, I spent $1,000 last month on eating out, that's my budget for this month. No, I want to say, let's start on zero. I can retool and I decide what my budget's going to be. Now, some of these things in your life are fixed costs. You can't decide what your rent cost is going to be, things like that. But I'm going to start at zero, and I can decide what my revenue is going to be. I know what my salary is from the college. That is only one way that I can make income. I can make income many different ways. So just because I have a full-time job, and it's a great one, doesn't mean that I have to be capped at that point. I can do more, and why shouldn't I? And then we also have a balanced scorecard budget. So this is used by over 50% of the Fortune 500 companies. Essentially, this is what they do. So they figured out how to translate its mission, vision, and goals into measurable targets. So they look through the eyes of finances, they look through the eyes of customers' perspective, they look at employee growth and happiness, and they come up with like a scorecard system. And they come up with these 4 different things. So the first one is an objective. So for you, this might be you want to complete this financial management course. So that is your objective. The next is a performance measure. So how do we measure if we did well or not? This could be occupancy rate. This could be Google reviews. For you, it's just a grade. It's a grade. It's a percentage. Then we also would put in a performance target. So our performance target will be something. So if it's occupancy rate, it's average of 80. If it's revenue per available room, it's $120. For you, the performance target, let's say, is a 75%. And then the action. So the action is what I need to do to ensure I hit my 75% in this course. So what I'm going to do is complete assignment number 2 before the next test, and I want to score 80% on the next test. So that's a very reasonable action. I'm aiming higher than my 75% because I don't know how I'm actually going to do. But this is a realistic amount to choose because I don't know at what point, saying I'm going to hit 100% is not really realistic. So you got to make sure you kind of pick those things that is achievable. So when we talk about SMART, it's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. Those are the objective measurement tools. Comprehensive budgets have received all revenue forecasts and budgets from all operating managers. So this will be like your full resort comprehensive budget. So all departments, rooms, housekeeping, the restaurants, any rentals, golf course, you name it. So they will give you all of their budgets. And then with this, you are able to create statements of income statements, balance sheets or statements of financial position, and statements of cash flows. So this is a big one here. This is general management, top management who comes up with this. And those people might ask their individual departments to come up with a budget, submit it to them for approval. And as a general manager or owner level, you might make changes and say, I see that you put here a 5% increase in revenue. I need to see a 7.5% increase in revenue over next year. So while as a department manager, let's say you're the front desk manager, you might have a say in budgets. You don't have the final say in budgets. And then there's another one, which is not really created with any of these things in mind, but a capital budget is a long-term budget where we say, okay, we own property, we own vehicles, we own equipment. Eventually this stuff will need to be replaced. And I don't want to wait until the end of year 10 and then all of a sudden have this huge bill to replace all of my beds in all of my rooms. Instead, what I want to do is that if I think I need to replace them in 10 years, and I think it's going to be $1 million to replace all the beds, I want to put away $100,000 every single year until year 10. So this is my budget. This is my budgetary savings year over year, long term. So then when that year comes, I have the money set aside. This is a difficult thing to do because you have to really think far in the future, and we don't know what's going to happen. As I mentioned before, as an example, investment in new technology and training. Right now, I think that we're going to probably see the death of the hotel card. So no one's going to have to touch a card as the future goes on, as well as the self check-in or the contactless check-in. So I can pull up to the resort, I can go walk up to my room, I can either punch in a code or use my phone or a QR code or something to get into my place, and I don't need to actually see anyone. And that is going to be the way of the future. It's convenient, and people love convenience, and it's safe, and people will definitely be looking at that as a future issue. So I wouldn't have been able, if I did this capital budget, I probably wasn't thinking of that in advance. I wasn't thinking that every single door would need to be replaced with new technology, new locks. But that's going to have to happen. So while you can set this 10 years in advance, every 6 months, 1 year, you should probably sit down, take a look at it and say, okay, you know what? We're going to take some of this money that we've been setting aside to replace all these beds, and we got to invest it in some new doors or new technology. And then there's some complementary budgets. So these are the offspring of operating budgets, and they help present data differently. So here are two. This is a product and cash budget. So product budgets are considered a complementary budget as they look at the revenue of different products bring in. So if you have a bunch of different styles of room, and often we do, right? We have junior suites, deluxe rooms, chalets, cottages, penthouses. You have a single queen bedroom with no amenities, and then you have these nice 2-bedroom suites. So they all bring in different amounts of money, and they all work better for us or worse for us, depending on what we do. So this will be a product budget. So looking at each individual product that we sell and determining what our cost of sales, expenses, and how much we make off each one. So here you see they're looking at 3 different types of rooms: junior suite, deluxe room, and a beach chalet. They all bring in a substantial amount of money over the year, and you look at the cost of sales. Now, as you can see, the cost of sales for the junior suites are most definitely the highest, probably because we sell more of them, and then therefore there's more cleaning, there's more more check-in process because you have more rooms being sold, so you have more staffing, and probably more equipment and products that are required for that as well. And then you see the expenses. So some of the expenses are very high on these beach chalets and these deluxe rooms. So obviously they're probably going to be higher end. So some of the expenses also go up with that. And then you also see your net product margin. So here we say junior suites, deluxe rooms, and beach chalets. We know which one that we do the best on. So this is a product budget. Cash budget is what we'll be doing today. So a cash budget is planning and controlling tool, and it looks at cash that is available and cash that will be required. So it is a part of cash flow. You would do a cash budget to look at your cash flow to see if you have enough cash flow. So a couple things that we look into it, and they're broken down by 4 different sections. Cash receipts. So this is when sales turns into cash. A cash disbursement, the cost of sales and expenses. So this is cash out. Cash surplus or deficit, the extra or short. So this is kind of like the total column. Do we have extra cash or do we not have not enough? And should we have not enough, do we need to finance? This happens all the time. A very good example would be if you have, let's say, a large convention or conference at your place. Typically, what might happen is you will request 20% upfront, but you might not ask them to pay the remainder of their bill for 30 or 60 days after they stay there. So that cash isn't coming in for up to 60 days, maybe 90 days. So when you think about that, if you have lots of bills upcoming in those 90 days and you are sitting on just this accounts receivable, which is nice, but it's not turning into cash anytime soon, that is where you say, hey, I need to short-term borrow for 60 days until that money comes in. So this is a cash budget example. So the Briars Resort and Spa is expected to bring in the following amounts of revenue shown below. 25, 40, 185,000. This is how they're doing. They have a busy March, a busy April, and kind of a slow January and February. They collect 20% of this revenue immediately. So 20% down deposit, 60% within 30 days, and the remaining 20% within 60 days. This is just their cash schedule, their purchase schedule. Now we make it very clean that for these examples, that every single customer has to pay in this way, or has the opportunity to pay in this way. Generally, it's a little bit different, but for this sake, it works well. So knowing that November sales were 55,000 and December's was 120,000, complete the below cash budget portion. Now, it's much easier done in example and in person, but I will give you a quick idea. So in January, 20% is that we take something right away. So 20% in this box will be $5,000. So that is 20% of 25,000. Then on a 30-day payment, we take in 60%. So this is where it gets confusing for some people. So for the January revenue, we will take 60% of this 25,000 in February. So in this box here, 60% of 25,000 is 15,000. So 15,000. And then a 60-day payment is the final 20%. 60 days from January is March. And down here, we would put that extra 5,000. So what you'll see is this diagonal trend. So this $25,000 is broken down into 20% in January, 60% in February, and the remaining 20% in March. 5,000 plus 15 is 20, plus another 5 is 25. So that's how this is happening. And if you go over to February, 20% of 40 is 8,000, 60% is 24, another 20% is 8. So 8 plus 24 is 32, plus another 8 is 40. That's where that 40 is. So you have this diagonal approach of when this cash is coming in, which changes a lot. So total monthly receipts shows how much cash is coming in. We only sold $25,000 worth of revenue in January, yet we get $88,000 in cash. This is because in December, we sold 120, and in November, we did 55,000, and we're taking in a lot of this money in months ahead of that. So in December, we take 60% of this 120,000 in January, which is why this $72,000 is here. So as you see, this $24,000 in February is 20% of 60-day ago payment, which was December. So you can see how not necessarily the amount of money that you sell in that month is what you have left. In March, we sell over $100,000 in revenue. We only keep less than half of it. $49,000 is what we get. So this is another great example where you see that cash flow does not follow income statements. And rarely do they follow that. They're often much different. So I'm going to open up the assignment. And I gotta find it. One moment. So this particular assignment is our week 7 in-class activity. There we go. Okay. So I will give you all kinds of information. Let me zoom in so you can see a little bit better. So this is a little bit more in-depth than what we did in the in-class example. So it goes from November to April, and I've told you the marketing department forecasts the following sales numbers. So based on the marketing they've done and some of the reactions they had and some of the pre-bookings, this is what they're expecting to sell over the next 6 months. The credit manager, so the person or accounting manager, the people who accept this cash, this is what they're saying, that we're going to ask for 25% of sales on a cash basis. So the minute that they reserve or book, you got to pay 25% up front. 60% collected 30 days after, 15% collected 60 days after. Now this is also another thing that could happen. The same way in which people decide that they want to pay us in the future for something they want right now, we do the same with our suppliers. So let's say we're ordering from Gordon's Food Service or Cisco. We say, okay, I want to order $100,000 worth of food and product over this month. They might say, okay, don't worry, pay us 30% of that right now, and then you can pay us this other 70% within 30 days after the purchase is made. Other companies will do this for you as well, just as you are doing it for other companies. So they're allowing you another 30 days to get all of the money because they know that you're going to have to wait to collect some of that revenue as well. So we've kind of made this agreement that not only are we offering this to our customers, but people who we are customers of are offering it to us. So that this nice little generous way. So cost of sales, they say, is 50% of our sales up here. So cost of sales for November of 30 would be 15,000. Of 40,000 would be 20,000. Of 85 would be 4,250. You get it. And then we also have this monthly selling and administrative expense, and they are as follows. This is fixed costs. They're not going to change, so those are just the way they are. Other expenses are $5,000 in March. We purchased some new equipment in January for $22,000, and the cash balance of January 1st, 2018 is $15,000. So that's just what we have in the bank to begin this whole thing. They've also even given us a couple pieces of information from last year, so months that weren't on there, just because the way that we collect money, we will need to know this. And then just a reminder of the payment schedule and the purchase schedule right here. So this is a lot of information thrown at you, but you can just take it bit by bit. What I like to do first is often, let's fill in some of the blanks that we know. So cash balance is an easy one. On January 1st, 2018, it's $15,000. So here, this is all our revenue area, that's that diagonal breakdown. Cost of goods sold, so we're going to be doing the same thing. Our cash surplus and deficit after all of our revenue and our cost of goods sold. Then we'll take away our expenses. So these particular expenses here, they're fixed, so every single month they will be the same, and I've already gone ahead and put that in. And then the beginning bank balance, $15,000 here, so I put that in as well. So one thing we can do is that we will purchase $5,000, or we will pay for our taxes of $5,000 in March, and in January we buy new equipment for $22,000. So it's quite simple. January we purchase new equipment for $22,000, and in March we have to pay $5,000. Okay. So we can even just do our sum function right here, add all of these particular items up, and just click and drag that over. And then we know every month what we're spending on these expenses. Let's go up to the top. Okay, so $85,000. Let me pull up my calculator and size it so it's not. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see this. All right. So $85,000. Cash sales, $25,000 right now. So $85,000 times 0.25 is $21,250. And then we get 60% on this date. So actually, I'll just use the Excel because it'll be easier. So this one times 0.60, and then 15%. So it's the revenue of January times 0.15. Now, as you can see, I did this diagonal line. This is saying right away in 30 days. So the January revenue will be 60% of it will be earned in February, which is $51,000, and then 60-day payment, the $15,000 there, and that's how I would add all that up. And you can add those three numbers up to make sure that they are $85,000. And the same formula will exist where it's $115,000 times 0.25, and actually this can just be pulled over. This one here will be February times 0.60. And really, I should be able to pull this one over as well because 60% of 130,000 is 78. And then this final one will be 15% 60 days later. So this is our February revenue times 0.15. And there we go. So we have done what we could up until using the January through April amounts. Now this can keep going. So you can actually keep pulling these numbers across and showing in April we would retain %60 of this if you want to show. So this would be May and so on. But that's not what I'm asking you right now, so don't worry about it. We also have this 30-day payment from 60 days ago, which is blank, and we have this 60-day payment for two different dates, which is why this November and December dollar amounts are important. So, assuming December is right before January, which it is, we will take 60% of $40,000 in January, and we will take 15% of $40,000 in February. And then the same thing with the 60-day, which will be 15% of this $30,000 there. So now we have completed what looks to be all of the revenue for January, February, March, and April, all of the cash that's coming in from the revenue for really the 6 months. And now this will just be a quick addition of all the things above you. And I can pull that across. Now you can see the differences of money in, where in January, yeah, we sold $85,000. Oh, no, I did this wrong, sorry. Just these three. Don't add the revenue in. Okay, so here's saying in January, yes, we sold $85,000 worth of stuff, but we only keep about $50,000 in cash. And same thing with February, $85,000. March, $114,000. In April, now we start to see we're bringing in a little bit more money than our revenue because of this big month before and a fairly big month before that. So this gives you an idea of how you would do this cash payment schedule. Now we would do the same thing here with the cost of goods. So the cash sales, and we can do this in class. From there, we will take whatever our total monthly cash receipts minus our cash disbursements, so how much we need to pay out, equals our cash surplus or deficit. From the cash surplus or deficit, we subtract the cash disbursements expense, so how much do we got to pay out just for living there, and how much plus or negative do we have. So we put in our cash surplus, we put in our expenses here. It doesn't look good that right now. This looks like it might go into the negative, so we'll have an ending bank balance of whatever this number is. Then at that point, then you would sit down with your management and say, hey, it looks like in January we might not have enough cash to cover all of our expenses. We'll need some sort of loan. We're going to need to pull some money from somewhere. And with most big businesses, it's quite easy to do. So this is an intro to the cash budgets. So this is in-class exercise, actually number 7, sorry, not number 6. Take a look, try it on your own. I want you to try this portion on your own as well. So if you can understand that the cost of sales is 50% of January, so it'll be times 0.5. And of that of this number, we pay 30% right away and 70% 30 days later. I probably have confused you, and that's okay. Next week in class, so either next Monday or Wednesday, we will go through both week 6 and week 7 material. It'll be a longer class, so make sure you have lots and lots of coffee. And I wish you a good week, and we'll talk soon.